Welcome to this short screencast on web accessibility. Over the next 15 minutes or so, I'll cover what accessibility is, why it's important, and how to make it a key part of your next website or mobile app. My name is Dan Mouyard, and I'm a lead front-end developer at Forum One. I've been building websites for over 15 years, and I have a lot of experience with designing and building accessible user interfaces. On a personal note, I'm legally blind and hard of hearing. I wear hearing aids, and I often need to bump up the font size and color contrast of websites that I visit. I also use a cane in crowded places and low-light situations. Please feel free to contact me via email at dmouyard@forum1.com if you have any questions. You can also find me on Twitter, GitHub, Drupal.org, and elsewhere on the web under the username dcmouyard. The four main topics I'm going to cover are the importance of accessibility, the different types of disabilities we encounter on the web, how to effectively communicate to an audience with a wide range of abilities, and finally, how to integrate accessibility into the process of designing and building a website or mobile app. So, why is accessibility so important? There are three main reasons. The first is the moral reason. It's just the right thing to do. Consider the following question. How does your website contribute to making the world better? Every website should be able to answer this question. Some websites can argue that their content helps make the world better. But even a website that just sells kitty litter can make the world better by making it possible for people with disabilities to use that website. How we design and build websites affects a tremendous number of people. Here's a great quote from Judith Heumann at the U.S. Department of Education. For some people, without disabilities, technology makes things convenient. For people with disabilities, it makes things possible. Next is the legal reason, because it's the law. There's a chance you could get sued. Unfortunately, some companies and organizations don't put resources into accessibility unless ignoring it affects their bottom line. In 2006, Target was sued because their online store was completely inaccessible to people that use screen readers. That lawsuit ended up costing Target around $10 million. In the U.S., Section 508 requires that federal agencies make their websites accessible to people with disabilities. And recently, the U.S. Department of Justice has been enforcing accessibility requirements for websites and mobile apps, most notably in settlements with H&R Block and peapod.com. My favorite reason, however, and why accessibility is so important, is because everyone is disabled. This probably comes as a shock to some of you, but it's an extremely important concept to internalize. Everyone is disabled. When first learning about web accessibility, people tend to think that it's only for people who are completely blind, which is understandable because the negative impacts are obvious, and the most high-profile cases dealt with people who use screen readers. But there are other types of disabilities, which I'll cover later, such as hearing, mobility, and cognitive impairments. Yet even within vision impairments, there's a huge range you need to consider. Not only do we need to make websites accessible for those who are completely blind, we need to address the needs of those with varying levels of vision loss, such as the elderly. Did you know, at age 40, only half the light gets through to the retina as it did at age 20? And at age 60, it's just 20%. In fact, nearly 9% of Americans are visually impaired, meaning their vision cannot be completely corrected with lenses. That's more than 28 million people in the U.S. alone. I'm sure some of you are thinking, come on, Dan, that's still not everybody. I thought you said everyone was disabled. Now I want you to imagine that it's a beautiful sunny day, not a cloud in the sky. You're walking outside, taking in the fresh air, when you decide that you want to find the nearest place to buy an ice cream cone. So you whip out your mobile phone or tablet, and what happens? The glare from the sun on your device makes it very difficult to see. This is what we call a situational disability, where something in your environment or situation temporarily interferes with your ability to interact with the website or mobile app. And guess what? The same solution that make websites accessible to those who are blind or have low vision also helps those who are outside looking at their phone on a sunny day. In fact, better accessibility makes things easier for everybody. And not just for those with permanent or situational disabilities. Think of sidewalk ramps at street corners. They don't just help people in wheelchairs. They also help those pushing baby carriages or shopping carts. For example, improving the color contrast between text and the background makes it possible for people with low vision to read that text. It also makes that text easier to read for those with perfect vision. Another example, simplifying the search interface on your website makes it possible for those with cognitive impairment to search your site. It also makes the search experience easier and more enjoyable for those without cognitive impairments. Remember, accessibility is not about reducing everything down to the lowest common denominator, nor is it about abandoning branding, beauty, or creativity. It's about designing a great experience while simultaneously maximizing the number of people invited to enjoy that experience. So let's talk about the main disability type that we deal with on the web: vision, hearing, mobility, and cognition. Getting data at a sufficient level of granularity is a bit difficult, but the conventional wisdom around disability statistics is that there are more people who have low vision than those who are completely blind. And there are more people who are hearing impaired than those who are visually impaired. There are more people who are motor impaired than those who have trouble hearing. And finally, there are more people who are cognitively impaired than all of the others combined. So when dealing with impairments, we need to be aware of a broad spectrum of abilities. Vision impairments ranging from those who are completely blind to those with varying levels of and types of visual impairments, and even to those with temporary impairment due to their environment or device. Blindness, low vision, photosensitive epilepsy, color blindness, light sensitivity, photophobia, and situational problems due to screen glare or uncalibrated monitors. Hearing impairment can range from those who are completely deaf to those with varying levels of hearing loss. Remember that your audience might be in a noisy environment or might have the sound turned off on their device. Using haptic feedback, such as vibrations, can really be helpful in those circumstances. And have you ever been in a sports bar trying to watch the big game? Or in a noisy gym trying to watch the news? You probably can't hear the TV announcers, but you can still understand what they're saying because of closed captioning. Mobility impairments can range from those with physical paralysis to those who have trouble controlling and coordinating their muscles. Even temporary conditions like strained muscles or a broken keyboard or mouse can interfere with people's ability to interact with your website. There are a wide variety of input devices that people use, such as joysticks, SIP/PUF devices, and floor switches, and you need to make sure your website is still usable to those products. Finally, there's a wide variety of cognitive impairments that people have to deal with on a daily basis. Some are permanent, while others are only temporary, but they all need to be kept in mind when planning, designing, and building a website. Brain injury, attention deficit disorders, dyslexia, problems with memory and perception. Even users with low literacy and those viewing a website not in their native language can have trouble understanding content. Simplifying concepts, showing helpful icons and graphics, reducing distractions, and using plain language can all significantly improve the experience for those with cognitive impairments. And remember, those same solutions will make your site even easier to understand and more enjoyable without impairments. Okay, now I'd like to take a moment and test your ability to quickly guess what the object is in the photograph I'm about to show you. I will only show it for around half a second, so pay attention very closely. You ready? So what was that? A stop sign. Isn't it amazing how quickly you were able to deduce what it was? It's a terrible picture, isn't it? It's blurry. You can't even see the entire sign. So why do you think that is? It's all about effective communication. What are the ways in which this photograph conveys information that this is a stop sign? The shape. It's part of an octagon, although we can't see the entire thing. The text. It says stop, even though we can only see a part of the text. Have you ever seen a stop sign in a foreign country? You can still tell, even though it's in a foreign language. It's red. Color is another important tool for conveying information. Even if you couldn't see the color red, though, it's still obviously a stop sign. The brightness contrast between the red background and the white text and white line at the edge of the sign is noticeable. The placement is also a clue. Stop signs are generally on the right-hand side of roads. So the key to effective communication is providing information using a variety of different sensory channels so that users will understand the content, even if they don't understand or can't sense one of those channels. People who can't see red still know it's a stop sign. People who can't read English still know it's a stop sign. If someone had an impairment that prevented them from understanding shapes, they could probably still know that it's a stop sign. The same goes for websites and mobile apps. You want to use text, graphics, sound, and anything else you can think of to communicate information to users. Not only will it help those who might not be able to read the text, or see the graphic, or hear the sound, it will make users who can see, hear, and read understand it that much easier. Finally, I want to talk about integrating accessibility into your process for planning, designing, and developing your website or mobile app. All too often, accessibility is an afterthought. Project teams ignore accessibility until the website is almost ready to launch, perhaps during a final QA phase when everything is tested. The problem with this approach is that when accessibility problems are found, they probably take a long time to fix. Websites then either need to delay launch until they're fixed, or they have to launch an accessible website. The reason these problems take so long to fix is because the code, or the design, or something else needs to be refactored in order to make it accessible. And this refactoring could have been avoided if accessibility was thought of in the first place. Imagine that your organization had built a building, and when it was almost finished, somebody discovered that it wasn't wheelchair accessible. You then have to redo some of the architectural plan to include ramps and elevators. You also need to tear down some of the work you've already done and build these new accessible features. Doesn't that sound like a waste of time and money? Waiting until the end of a project can make accessibility very expensive. So the key is to think about accessibility during each phase of the product and test each new wireframe, design, or website functionality as they're planned and built. During content strategy, check the accessibility of old content during the content audit. Add step to your publishing workflow to check the accessibility of newly created content. And make sure that using plain language is part of your tone of voice style guide. During information architecture, make sure there are multiple ways to find and discover content, that information is located in obvious places, and reduce clutter to help users focus on the most important pieces of content on each page. During design, make sure you test color contrast, avoid distracting animations, and design easy-to-read text. During development, make sure you test each new functionality with automated testing tools, and manually test them with keyboards, screen readers, and touch devices. Thinking about accessibility throughout the process leads to better solutions and costs significantly less than waiting until the end. Well, that brings us to the end of this screencast. I hope you now have a better understanding of what accessibility is and why it's so important. Thank you for listening, and please feel free to contact me if you have any other questions.